everybody, this is Kat, and I am joined here by Rakhee. Rakhee, say something. And we're at that sort of stage, I think, in life now where we're all so used to everything going wrong online all the time that that's just how it goes. So I'm going to attempt to show Rakhee. Oh, I think actually it's going to work this time, Rakhee.
Yay!
No,
I can see myself though on screen.
okay. I'm not sure if everyone can see, because I can see two of me, which is disturbing.
Okay, I can just see myself. So, oh, I can see. I've got a side thing going as well on my iPad, and we are both in stream. So,
Oh wait,
yeah,
yes,
it works. So,
right.
great.
How are you, Rakhee?
I am very well. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I felt a little bit unwell this week, it has to be said, but I have been enjoying the philosophy course a lot. I've been following along. I haven't actually felt up to doing the practices. I've been doing a lot of restorative yoga because I'm not feeling myself right now. But the philosophy, I'm loving. And
Yeah.
I wanted to just take this opportunity to have a bit of a delve in here because I know that you are pretty good at this philosophy stuff, and my brain isn't particularly working with not feeling particularly well. So Rakhee, talk me through.
Yeah.
So what yoga philosophy got to do with modern life anyway?
So well, I'm just going to say hello to lots of our lovely movers who are all joining on, and there are some of the lovely people we've been speaking to
yes,
a lot this year. So hi Alex, Emma, Jada, Millie, and whoever else is out there joining us, and all the shy people that are not yet saying hello. I thought that it would be really interesting if we started out this evening, if I just put a little bit of the Yoga Sutras into context, because yoga philosophy is interesting, and I delve into it because it fascinates me, but it also frustrates me sometimes because it isn't. Some of the concepts aren't really easy to grapple with, but I think there are some really clear reasons why. So I thought I'd do a little bit of context, but what I thought whilst I'm yabbering on with a little bit of background is if the people joining us wanted to let us know how much they know about yoga philosophy, how much they have delved into it, because I think it would be really interesting to have a conversation, because you asked me how does this relate to modern life, and in fact I think it might relate to modern life in lots of different ways, because I think true to the traditions, it isn't a fixed thing. So I think when things get written down, we think and I was about to use the term gospel truth, and of course that comes from the fact that the Bible is written down, and so it's as though that is fixed somehow. And the Yoga Sutras come from an oral tradition, and what we have are 196 pithy little phrases. So they're called the sutras because the word comes, in fact, our word suture, as in a stitch, comes from the word sutra. So it's a little aphorism that can be really thought-provoking. There aren't any verbs, so it's a series of phrases that you have to kind of try and decode. And traditionally, this would have been done with a teacher. So we have loads of gaps. So here are little things to riddles, if we like. I don't think anyone actually calls them riddles, so I'll probably get the yoga police on my back. But they are a bit like a riddle to
never
me.
far away from you, Rakhee.
But it is something we need to decode, and traditionally people would have decoded them with the help of a teacher. And what we do have still are some commentaries. So there is one theory that the Yoga Sutras were the first commentary was actually also written by Patanjali. So that there are loads of mysteries, which I sometimes think I get equally fascinated by the history and the mystery of these things, as well as what they say. So we don't know much about Patanjali. There are 3 major texts by someone called Patanjali, but I think it's pretty conclusive they're not the same Patanjali. So there was.
He's always referred to as the sage Patanjali, isn't
he? He is, and he also there is a sage Patanjali that wrote a lot of texts around Ayurveda, which is the sister science of yoga. There was a Patanjali who wrote a Sanskrit grammar, and there is a Patanjali who has put together these aphorisms. So there are 4 chapters in the Yoga Sutras, and it's really the first 2 that people focus on. So the first one has got lots of things that people may have heard of, like a definition of yoga. So it starts out by saying, now is the time for yoga, and yoga is the stilling of the fluctuations of the mind. So in fact, that first chapter is really about the importance of meditation, and the second chapter tells us a little bit about practice and how we should practice it. But again, it's a little bit confusing, and really it keeps coming back to meditation more so than physical practice. And within this nested the 8 limbs that we're looking at, but they're a small part of a very small series of 196 phrases. And so the 8 limbs are in fact just one of these phrases. The third chapter is about magical powers, so it's really out there. It's I
love the magical power.
So it's about, if you meditate on the pole star, you will understand, you will see the nature of the constellations, and you will, if you do the right practices, you gain the strength of an elephant, and so all sorts of things happen. So again, no one knows what this is. Is it real? Are they metaphors? Is it a guide to practice? Is it a little bit of clever marketing? We don't know. Is it sort of people saying, come and be part of this amazing yoga school and get magic? Because who doesn't want magical powers, really? And then the final chapter is concerned with liberation. And in this case, I don't know, I find Patanjali's presentation of liberation a little bit bleak, because and this is where it gets a little bit like your head will begin to, and I was just going to say, your head probably already hurts, Kat, if you're not feeling great. So that this is the bit where it can feel a bit frustrating, because that ancient view of the nature of reality is a little bit different to ours. So in Patanjali's yoga, and I just wanted to add here that yoga was a philosophical school as well. So
now stop right there, Rakhee, because we have got some questions.
Okay.
Now you have said yoga is a philosophical school. We're going to hold that thread so that we can come back.
Yeah.
We've got loads of great questions from Emma. Okay. And this question now relates to that bit. How did yoga philosophy impact on other religions as they developed?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So, and in fact, Emma also asks about Buddhism as well.
Yeah. You've got the questions. Great.
So in fact, what was going on, and this is what I find really interesting, is that I think, again, we think we're very international and connected, and I think I was really interested to learn they were very connected in ancient India as well. So that there was a certain amount of travel, and in fact, it was another thing that, and I'm coming to the Buddhism, I haven't forgotten it. One thing that really fascinates me is that the ancient Greeks also traveled over and got to the Himalayas, so that there is definitely some influence between ancient Greek philosophy and ancient Indian thought as well. So it was fluid. People traveled and people talked. And so in ancient India, here we are, there's this school, there are lots of school of philosophy. People are thinkers, no different to us. You know, we have people that are proponents of capitalism or communism, whatever ideologies you want to take. People meet, talk, cross-fertilize ideas, take a bit from here and there. So a very traditional, which is known as the orthodox philosophy, it relates to the Vedas, and it's known as Vedic philosophy, and that's where the yoga philosophy, so Patanjali, comes in. However, at the same time, there were the Jains and the Buddhists who were developing their own thoughts, and there are some theories that, in fact, Patanjali's Yoga Sutras were a response to Buddhism, which was becoming very, very popular. And
whereabouts was that? Was that in China?
No,
where was Buddhism?
It was in India. So
both in the Indian subcontinent. Okay.
Yeah. So the Buddha was an Indian prince, and he when he was born, people. Well, his family were like, "Oh, precious little prince mustn't see any suffering." So the Buddha was kind of hidden away. Well, he wasn't hidden away. Suffering was hidden from him. And he was a curious little boy, and he wanted to know more. And I think he went out into the town and he saw people suffering. He thought, oh, this is dreadful. What's going on? And so his life was all about how do we escape from suffering? And in the end, I think his conclusion was, you don't. Life is suffering. Once you're born, you suffer. So both Buddhism and yoga philosophy, as it was at the time, and I'm deliberately not calling it Hinduism, which I think developed as a religion per se a little bit later, or is designated as a religion later. I'm so careful with these things because you do get the yoga there'll be some philosophical expert watching this or write in and go, oh my god, she knows nothing. But so the Buddha developed, again, practices of meditation, and he really talked about the middle path. So it's just about not being extreme. But when we read the Yoga Sutras, we find a lot of the same teaching. So in the Yoga Sutras, and one of my favorite sutras is about how on earth do you deal with other people. And Patanjali talks about, feeling happiness for those that are happy, and being just kind of uninterested in those that are full of vice. So there are lots and lots of links between Buddhism and Patanjali's Yoga Sutra, all the way up to what happens when you die. And I think those very early Buddhists were about, poof, you vanish, and the question is, what is then reincarnated? But with Patanjali's sutras as well, when he talks about liberation, so basically he's talking about being liberated from your body, so the bit that isn't the body. So the ancient yogis believed that your mind, your thoughts are all part of the body. There is just this bit that isn't your body that we might call the soul now, but it doesn't even have awareness, because that is material, and that is also part of the body. When you die, it is liberated or reincarnated. So there is a lot of cross-fertilization, and these two things were taking place or at the same time. And the other thing that might be relevant for us to think about today is also the role of a yogi in life. So I think in ancient India, it became really fashionable to kind of leave your family, leave your village, and off you go. You became an ascetic yogi. You were looking into the nature of things. You had a kind of life of a hermit and a nomad. And in fact, a lot of Buddhist monks started to do that, and it all became about, you were so dedicated to your practice. And in fact, one of the other really important texts of yogic philosophy, the Gita, also addresses this, because suddenly they found that all these young men were going off to drop out, and suddenly they were like, that's no good. Who's going to look after things? So we then get this introduction of the sense that you can be both a yogi and a householder. So and
that's how that happened.
And that's how that happened. I mean, basically, people were pissing off and hanging out, and they were becoming ancient.
They were dropping out,
and becoming an ancient version of a hippie. And then suddenly it's like, well, someone needs to come and do the work and live a life. So maybe you can do both, and that's a really interesting concept for us.
Again, to interrupt, we have a question on another thread. Again, this is Emma. What are the Yamas and the Niyamas?
What are the Yamas and the Niyamas? Yeah, so the
translation.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question. So the Yamas and the Niyamas, and Emma's asking more questions on this thread as well. And so
questions.
The Yamas and the Niyamas are basically, they're sometimes known as observances and restraints. So we've been looking at the Yamas, which are the restraints, so that they're often translated as non-violence, non-stealing, non is put in front of that. And in fact, in the Sanskrit, it's ahimsa. So himsa is violence and ahimsa is non-violence. So you often have that structure. And the niyamas are the observances. So it's things like contentment, cleanliness. So one is more about what you restrain from doing.
You don't do, yeah.
And the other one is what you do. So you practice contentment, you practice cleanliness, for example. So those are the Yamas and Niyamas, but there are lots of Yamas and Niyamas. So I think we also sometimes get hung up on these 8, but there are loads. There are loads of different systems have their own. So there are more, and there are sometimes things like duty come in. So lots of different the ancient yogis, and in ancient in India, they seem to love lists. So we love lists, don't we?
This will take you to the front of every blog.
Yeah, exactly. So social media loves lists. We love lists. We like to classify things, and so there are lots of lists. And I was looking into this a bit more, and I did get, there are 6-limbed paths and 10-limbed paths, and there are lots of lists within Buddhism as well, which we'll look at a bit more when we look at come to do the Buddhism course in a few.
I don't know. People don't know that yet.
Oh, don't they know?
No.
Okay.
They may have wondered, you guys, you may have wondered why this is Ancient Wisdom for Modern Life #1. So, but Ancient Wisdom for Modern Life #2 is up and coming, and it is the Buddhism part. So
yeah, and who knows where we'll go in the future. But yes, so the Niyamas, the Yamas and Niyamas are these lists of do's and don'ts, and they exist in lots of different systems, and really. We can adhere to these ones if we like them. We can pick ones from different systems. They often have very similar, they're often very similar, and they often share some of these core tenets. So ahimsa is more or less in most of them, and in fact, I think Gandhi said that the 2 he really picked were ahimsa and satya, so truth and a non-violence. So yeah, but that if you look around that among some of the sources, there are others. Or we're also intelligent human beings that can add things that we feel are really important and try and practice them. And then really, I think it is about practice. And I think that's what Patanjali says, that it is about practice. And he refers to tapas a lot. So it's about that discipline, but it's about just going back to practice. And of course, what he's talking about is not so much, doing your daily headstand or whatever physical, although that is also a part of the tradition, but it is more about the meditation practice. And the yamas and niyamas are there as a way to prepare yourself to meditate well. So probably, I suspect, if you've gone out and done harm, and I don't know, killed someone, stolen something, live in a really messy, stinky room and feel a little bit grumbly, you aren't going to meditate in a calm, clear way, and you will therefore never reach liberation. So the purpose of the yamas and niyamas are to live well, but also to prepare yourself for meditation. I think in Buddhism, there is a lot more focus and emphasis on that sense of community as well. So the Sangha is something that is very central to Buddhism, which doesn't appear so much within Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. It does seem to be a very individual path. So this is what you do if you want to achieve liberation. And it's quite interesting, because what is it? Is it a manual for how we practice, or is it describing the state of yoga? Because yoga is both the means and the end. So there are lots of questions, and it's also, the other interesting thing is we sort of link some of these to religions, and God comes into Patanjali, but as we know, there are multiple gods with it from the Indian subcontinent, like hundreds, and you kind of pick the one that speaks to you, or there are hierarchies and all sorts. But in fact, what Patanjali says is, as he sort of refers to God as more as a greater power. So I think when he talks about there's a within the guidelines, he talks about Ishvara Pranidhana, which is surrendering, but actually it's surrendering to God. So sometimes, and we talk about this, we have our own version, don't we? Let go and let God. So, but it isn't any one particular God, and Patanjali would have had his pick of God. So he's not saying chant the name of Krishna or anything. What he's saying is sometimes you've got to accept that there is a bigger picture, and you are this one little element in this huge big picture, and it's not. So it is non-sectarian. It doesn't refer to any one God. It just says sometimes you are looking to something that is bigger and wider and stronger, the source. I mean, you can call it what you will, and this is also where I think sometimes people wonder about Om and why we chant Om, and Om is chanted both in Buddhism and in Hinduism, Jainism. I mean, there are lots of religions growing out of the Indian subcontinent that chant Om, but it's also there are other places in which we can hear these sounds. So Amen is often considered a kind of linked into this sound. I think people have done all sorts of research into the sound of the universe and whether it does sound like Om. And I think people have recorded, I'm not quite sure how they've done this, but I did read about this, the sound of the universe, and it does sound like Om. But in fact, one thing that Patanjali advises is meditation on Om, which is also, in a sense, the universe. It is the sound of the universe. So which is why, people are sort of thinking, well, are we chanting a something that particularly belongs to Hinduism or Buddhism, but it crosses that, and it can go beyond that as well. So right, there are loads of questions. I'll just stop talking, and we should look at some of the.
Oh my goodness, have you seen this one? How do we reconcile the need for yoga to help others with, for example, economic issues, when we need to disregard those four vices, when it's those people who cause the problematic structural issues of society like racism and poverty? Rakhee, for you.
If I knew the answer to, or the solution to this one, I would be a lot wiser, and I would.
You're pretty wise, Rakhee.
But I think so. If we actually look at going back to the text we are looking at, well, we can look at this in two or three different ways if we relate it to what is said within yoga philosophy. And so one thing is that I think we need to concern ourselves with ourselves and make sure that we are adhering to the path, and I think not get caught up or with someone else's path. And by that I don't mean practicing complete indifference and not being outraged when people do something that is worthy of our outrage. But I think a part of it is to focus on our own path. And I think that there are people who cause the problematic structural issues of society like racism and poverty. Well, I think there's nothing within the sutras that says don't also be socially engaged. And I think that's what we were, in fact, more than in the sutras, in the Gita, that's what the whole text is about. So just to kind of I'll do a really brief summary of that. There is that's about a battlefield, and it is there's a guy called a warrior, and this is a battle. It's one of these wonderful things that has now got embedded in myths. So there's just loads of amazing larger than life characters, but really what it boils down to is that Arjuna has to fight his cousins. And so when he looks across the battlefield and he sees all his cousins there, and his teacher, and I think that the teacher in that society was a lot more important than the way we regard our teachers now. So it's his guru, and he sees his family, and he knows that if he fights there will be loads of bloodshed. And he's with his friend Krishna, who is considered to be an incarnation of God, and he says, well, look, I can't do this. I can't. It's wrong. I'm going to kill people, and I can't do it. And Krishna was like, well, you know what? It's your duty to do it, and you have to act in the right way, but without being attached to the outcome. So it's about doing the right thing and then not being so attached to the outcome that you. And that's where we think about the attachment to desire. You just need to act in the way that is the right way to act, and then a little bit you have to let go. I mean, I don't know, and Alex, if I fully answered, I probably haven't answered that, but I just think it's really pertinent to our times. Actually.
I was going to say, that's where we kind of get that skill in action, isn't it?
Yeah.
That phrase, like yoga is skill in action.
Yes.
Because it's quite interesting. They've kind of got different definitions in the different texts. So Patanjali's got a different kind of view of what yoga is to this kind of, which is more about what the actions of a yogi are.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, the whole of the Gita has got, I mean, so this is, there are these, and maybe I will I will try over the next few months. I'm not promising when, but I will try and put together a blog about the Gita as well. Just a really brief introductory one, a bit like I did with the Patanjali's Yoga Sutra. But I think that with the Gita, there are lots of Arjuna is saying, no, I'm not going to do it, and Krishna says he gives it, and he talks about the yoga of quite a lot in that text. So he sort of says, okay, well, he talks about knowledge, he talks about devotion, so he goes through a lot of different ways in which we can practice, and in the end, Arjuna does go onto the battlefield and fight, and the Gita is also it's more so the Yoga Sutras are more about this practice of meditation, whereas I think with the Gita there's a lot more about, as you said, Kat, taking action and that sense of skill in action, but it's also about that how we lead our lives, our duties. So we often talk about the Dharma in yoga, but with the Gita, it's also about your Svadharma, which is about your own path. So what is the right path for you, and what might be your path is not necessarily my path. So and then
and that's a great question. That leads from great question from Jada. Would that mean, for example, speaking up about racism, for example, but not be too attached to how others would take it on? And I'd say exactly that. It's like, for me, I love the Gita. Like, for me, the sutras are a bit sort of, they're a bit dry. I mean, it's fun, but they're a bit dry. But the Gita is like, this is the juice. This is where we get the ethics. I love that kind of thinking about what's wrong and what right, and that thing of like, your dharma isn't my dharma.
Yeah,
and you don't know what other people's paths are, and that's the kind of thing, and that's the law of karma as well, because we all have to take lots of different things into account.
Yeah, absolutely, and and I would echo what you were saying. So yes, you can speak out about racism, and you can be really nuanced about it as well. So when you are doing that, it is the right thing to do is to speak out about it. You can't make yourself then responsible for someone else's actions and reactions. So how they react or go on to act is, well, it's their karma, and it's what you've done the right thing, but also you can be really nuanced about it. So yes, it's a terrible thing. Probably the right way to react is not by going out and murdering every racist you can find. That is not meeting it skillfully. That may in some ways take that problem away, but that is not skillful, and that is wrong. So that you have to meet these things skillfully and not be attached to the fruits of your labor, is what Krishna says in the Gita. And it was funny. I grew up in a Hindu family, so kind of I didn't read the Gita till I was a lot older, but bits of it kind of drifted down, and so I used to think about this non-attachment thing when I used to do exams, and I was like, yeah, but you still say, but if I'm really, really good, can I please get a good mark in this exam? Apparently that's not how it works. Yeah, too attached to the outcome there.
But and we've had another brilliant question here from Millie. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'm reading. Is that the relevant elements? Yeah, that is a brilliant question. So
I absolutely love that. This is right up my street. I'm like, this is me. I'm leaning forward. This is this is real yoga.
So, and it is a really good question. So, I I will answer, but I was just thinking, what do you feel, Millie, is the most relevant way to meet these things? I think we can look back to these texts. So the Yoga Sutra would be like, yeah, whatever, just meditate. The Gita is more about act, but I think there is also the sense that a lot of and there are other texts that we haven't touched on, the Vedas and the Upanishads, and a lot of them are also, so when you talk about environmental concerns, the sense of being linked into the environment and nature is huge within this body of philosophy, and it's so, and it's really difficult to kind of just say in yoga philosophy, just because it's this very big, broad thing at which spans hundreds of years. So and you know, all the way till now. So we are still developing. You know, I don't know quite how philosophical we are, but we are still developing this tradition of yoga within the modern postural yoga that we practice. But I mean, I would say just within the 8-limbed path, which is what we're focusing on in this course. So just within that, you can already see that there are a lot of relevant things. So we talked last week with Vidya about ahimsa and non-violence, but you will have been, if you've been watching the talks this week, you will have encountered asteya and aparigraha, which are around greed and stealing. And so when we think about environmental concerns, I think those are so relevant. We are stealing from the earth, and in every culture, I know, in every culture we talk about Mother Earth. So I mean, who on earth goes and steals from their mother and behaves in this way?
I can expect no repercussions.
Well, yeah,
I think it's all going to be fine. And it's like, sorry, I'm now going to go on one.
Off you go.
And it's like the greed of the something that is intensive factory farming. That's just because we basically want to waste stuff. It's not to feed the world. It's so that we can waste more. And that's just pure greed. And obviously that goes straight back to the sutras. And that's what the pandemic was formed by, really. It's like us being, you know, using animals in ways which, you know, it's not been the way, and it's clearly not the right way. Whatever you think the right way is, it's not like that.
And hence we get that, you know, it's the COVID-19 is it's that what they're calling the zoonotic transfer. You know, it's we are cutting down habitat. That is safe for animals. Well, where are they supposed to go? I mean, as a small child, I grew up in Kenya, and I used to go to school every day, and I used to see giraffes on the way, and you know, there were monkeys crossing the road, and I'm not glamorizing, so I went to school opposite the national park, which is why I saw this. They didn't roam the streets of central Nairobi so much, but when I have been back, my brother still lives there, and when I have gone back to visit, I can see how much within my lifetime we have shrunk these environments.
We're encroaching on their world.
Yeah,
there's nowhere else to go, and that's just due to our greed.
And in fact, if we continue to reflect back on the Yamas and Niyamas, one of the Niyamas is Santosha, which is contentment. So why can't we be content with what we have? I mean, why do we have to go out and get stuff from elsewhere?
Yeah.
And in fact, it's really interesting. I read a book by slight detour of yoga philosophy. I read Animal, Vegetable, Miracle. I think I will look it up and post again, by Barbara Kingsolver. And so that was, in fact, what you were talking to Vidya about last week, Kat, was it's the writer goes back to her farm and she decides that she is only going to eat what she grows. And if she wants to eat animals, she has to. But not only does she rear them, she sees it all the way through till the end. And she's got a child, and she said it was really interesting seeing how the child reacted, because the child was actually quite like, this one's my pet and this one isn't. I think they were talking about lambs, or maybe there were piglets at the time, but it was, and she said it is only fair to do that. If I want to eat pork, then I have to do this. But what the one thing I learned that I was actually going to talk about in that book was how much is added to a lot of the things we consume, which is unnecessary. So the big thing everyone knows about is palm oil, but there's also the glucose syrup and the corn syrup. So you often see inverted corn syrup on labels. And the reason was that when in America post-war, and I think maybe post-depression, they started to grow a lot of corn because they were, and these are the sort of things, I think I mention this because we're suddenly finding ourselves in economic dire straits again. And so, it's like we need to guard against these sorts of things being repeated. So they grew a lot of corn because it was a way to stop poverty. So here is our very current modern dilemma. It's no different to that dilemma that we were talking about in the Gita. That we have poverty. How do we? And I don't just mean individual poverty. We are going to have we're going to have to do something, but our economic policy can't be to grow a load of corn, turn it into syrup and add it to food where it isn't needed, just because, it helped at that time, but now look, we're all addicted to eating corn syrup and absolutely everything, and we don't need it. But we're in a bind now because suddenly we've got to find. So this is our current dilemma: is how do you find a way to change the systems? And I think we've been hearing that an awful lot, haven't we?
Yes.
So we change the systems because it's not always. There are some nasty individuals out there, of course, but it's not always individuals. We now seem to have become bound to these systems. I'm just going to keep an eye on some of these. I can just go off on one. So.
Yeah, and I absolutely agree, and I think that the only thing to do now as modern yogis is to go for system change, is to sort of, and that's obviously, there were always problems with the system. The system's always been problematic, and it's always been up to individuals who are interested in seeking truth, seeking justice, to try to fight for the right way and to speak truth to power, speak truth again.
And it is, in fact, we can show these qualities in every way. So it's about not silencing those individuals that are speaking out now, because that is not stealing their voice. So they have a voice that needs to be expressed. So that's not stealing from them because of our own greed, not necessarily our greed, but just, as a society. So, and it's interesting if we relate it back. I think Millie had mentioned the pandemic. It's not been great, has it? But it has taught us things. as well. So I think, you know, and it's neither being great nor terrible. It is a thing. This is where we find ourselves, and I think we now need to move on. We find ourselves on this battlefield. How do we skillfully move through it without beating our chest? We have to find a way out, and maybe by adhering to some of these things and rethinking them for ourselves. So I think, Kat, when we were speaking earlier about something else, and you were talking about having watched the Brahmacharya film as well, and I think we were sort of talking about what is the relevance of that to modern life, and that modern life. And I was thinking with all of these things, although ahimsa is the one that still seems so resonant, some of them might feel like, a little bit, but I think, as Vidya was saying, if we probe, it's not just about the surface. I don't steal, or I you know, that Brahmacharya is about celibacy. It's also, it can be translated as energy restraint as well. So yes, it is, yes, pure translation. It is about celibacy, but it's all about managing your energy skillfully. So how do we do that? About stealing, and I think Vidya mentions this in her videos as well. It's about stealing time. Are we conscious of doing that? And I think within this, and hopefully this is changing. This used to like drive me nuts, was our whole culture of being busy. Being busy is just about stealing and not managing your energy properly. Both those things, you know, by being. I used to work in an office, but there were people, and so I faced a situation once where there was someone that for some reason felt that they had to stay till very late, and for some reason I felt I couldn't go. I was sort of her boss, and so I said it did become really difficult, and in the end it was like, you don't need to stay, please stop being busy. I am not impressed by the fact you are just putting in too much time. And really, she was stealing from her own family. She was stealing my time, certainly, which you can tell I still feel that. But this is the thing, is that stealing is not always about objects. It can be, just going back to we were talking about racism earlier. It's about maybe also stealing people's platforms and voices. So I think it's just about being aware that we can interpret these things. Doesn't say much. You know, the Yoga Sutras not going to give you the answer by just reading. You can read all the commentaries, and they are interesting. But you know, a commentary someone wrote in the 15th century or the 12th century or the whenever may not be quite as relevant. So you need to spend some time rethinking these up. We are also living where we are, and this is just my take on it. We're living in this time, in this place, having these experiences. We need to read and understand, and then think about, what does this mean to our lives, and how can we incorporate these teachings in a way that is relevant to our lives. Some of the old rituals may not serve us. Some of them are fun. Some of them may serve us. Some of them may not. But there are things that serve us. So we need to consider those as well. I'm going to just check what else we have here. So yes, Alex is saying, not letting ourselves be overwhelmed by our desires to the point of a kind of lack of sanity. Yeah, absolutely. Jade is saying, it's so challenging living in a car. Yeah. Oh, It is. This is one of the things that actually drives me nuts, that are addiction. And I think it is an addiction to being busy and being really productive. And in fact, a lot, and it's sad because I unfortunately think that yoga, the modern postural yoga, the yoga that we teach and practice, is also a victim to this. So it's a bit of a case of do some yoga, kind of feel a bit better, and then off you go. Now you're feeling, not completely drained and dead and everything. Off you go. Let's just keep working really hard for what?
And it's also our obsession with productivity that I think is a problem in and of itself as well. It's like, what are the most productive things to do? And as an entrepreneur and in the tech world, this is something that's very, there's people who are always trying to, there are hacks for everything. There's a life hack for things. And you just, sometimes things just calm down and grow some vegetables. And
so Jade is saying any advice, and I think it is really hard, particularly when you are working, and also sometimes I think we are our own enemy, and I think I really suffer from that. I don't particularly enjoy being busy. I quite like not being busy, but I also get very caught up in things, and in fact, sometimes when I'm doing that too much, I do try and ask myself, am I doing this because I'm trying to be greedy? And I'm greedy about really things that sound really positive and good and are not bad in and of themselves. And I don't it doesn't serve us to beat ourselves up. And it's really difficult, isn't it? Because I think at the end of the day, we probably can't do it all. And much as I'd like to, and I am the worst proponent of all these things, but I think we can't do it all. And so we've got to say, what is it we're willing to not do, or that we're willing to give up, or am I? And so one example is just, I really enjoy reading, but I can't really, every time anyone mentions a book that sounds brilliant, I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to get that. So I have got loads of books that I haven't read. And then I hear about the next one, go, oh yeah, I really want to know about that. And so I get that. And what, and now I've started reading ebooks because I've run out of physical space. But maybe that's the lesson, is that maybe I should just read some of these things. And I should be really truthful and realistic about how much time I have, because I know I'm not going to, I don't, at the moment, I don't have the time. There are times I have time and there are times I don't. And I don't think I'm particularly really dealing with your question here, Jada, but I think it is about, I'm just having a little bit of fun.
You're just having myself at the moment, but that's okay, Rakhee.
But I think really at the heart of it is asking ourselves why and how, and maybe if you are in that situation not of your own volition, or there is very little you can do about it, then maybe it is about, which is really hard, but it's about talking to people that are able to change things, and not in a very, you might not just say, look, this culture of busyness is really toxic, let's stop it right here. But it might be that there are little changes we can make.
So for me, I think it would also be making a mental note of just noticing, just observing it. So, for example, what I have started to do is I observe, when back in the old days, when you used to meet people and, you'd say, hi, how are you? It was for me, a stock response to say, I'm good, I'm busy. And that was how it was. And now I'm sort of noticing those sort of little things that I was doing, and I'm noticing it in other people. And maybe in an organization, in the people in the people you meet, it's sort of maybe just questioning it, thinking about it, just saying, Oh, busy, gosh, you know. And then maybe just starting a conversation about what that actually means and which bits are, you know, which bits of it are leading to contentment.
Yeah, and I think maybe it. So I'm really glad you brought up contentment, because I think, not that, you know, one should love one's Yamas and Niyamas all the same and not have a favorite, but I love the notion of contentment, because it's really challenging as well, and in fact, that's the one thing I like to try and do is practice contentment. And contentment is not about, I mean, you know, it in the Buddhist tradition, the Buddha talks about mudita, which is sympathetic joy. So it is that upsurge of joy, but he also talks about metta, which is loving kindness. So these are these positive emotions. But contentment for me is not quite the same as joy, but it is that underlying kind of base for things. And I think so often, particularly in this, this goes back to how we live within our society, is that I think we are fundamentally conditioned to not be content within our society. So there's a lot of things telling us that we're not quite right, we haven't got it quite right, and in fact, maybe, you know, we probably can be, well, we definitely can be happy with what we have, but that there is always striving, and I think the skill is in recognizing why you're striving for something, and really understanding the motivation behind it. And I think in one of Vidya's talks, she talks about getting the yoga catalogue and seeing,
that's right.
And I was like, because I really relate to that. Normally I'm fine, and then suddenly you get a thing, you go, God, I need that. I cannot live my life. My life would be so much better. Really? I probably wouldn't, but yes, contentment. So
yeah, you're right, Emma. Capitalism relies upon discontent. You're right. If we were all utterly content, nobody would be buying anything, and we'd be completely blissful.
Yeah, and then Alex is saying a lot of people correlate contentment with complacency. Yeah, absolutely. And you can be content and still want to change things.
Yes, absolutely. And be content, and but be able to see that out there in the world, things aren't perfect, and there are plenty of things that we need to work on. So yeah. And I love that, Dawn, you've been enjoying the classes with Vidya. It does make it really relatable, and I definitely want to do more things like this.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is we need to think about how these relate to us, and it is little things. It's being aware of people's time, people's energy, our own time, our own energy, our own. I think last week we in the live there was a lot of. We really covered thinking about violence, and it not necessarily being big violence, but little violence, and which goes all the way to the microaggressions we hear about. But also we haven't talked that much about satya and truth, and it's also about thinking about the nature of that. So I think with all these things, they can sound very big and grand, but they really are, I think, completely relevant to our lives, and we need to figure out, really probe and look at a broader and greater definition and understanding of these things. And I think we don't live hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So we need to apply them to the way we lead our lives now. And we do have these amazing tools. By living in this way, our minds are clearer, and maybe we are better able then to see the nature of reality, which probably doesn't rely on, buying leggings that cost £200. But, I think probably that is, not necessary for our happiness and our truth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And listening to you, Rakhee, and being with all of your comments on this, really, it spurs me on to think this is so great that we're all together on this journey of working out what these amazing people so many years ago, what they have to do with us and our crazy modern world. And it's kind of beautiful that now we can kind of try to work all of this out together. And we're going to do much more stuff on yoga philosophy and just do things that we can all think about things differently. Because I like that it's not this is how things are. It's just this is one take on what this crazy phrase without verbs might have meant.
Yeah.
And this is how we can make it relate to the crazy times that we find ourselves in. And this is how we can help each other through it. It's so important to know that we're all here for each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing. I think philosophy fundamentally is just about figuring out how to live better and to be able to see into the nature of the way things really are, and to kind of accept and unpick some of those. So I think it can sound really complicated, and I think it can be complicated, but it can also be really simple. So I think it is about really exploring it in the way that is appropriate for us.
For us, absolutely. We'll be doing plenty more of that. And loads of you have got to go, and I think that's a good time.
Time's up. So we have no live next week,
right?
But we have a live with Vidya at the week after, and that's the final week of the philosophy course. So
number one, a philosophy course number one.
Yeah, and we've got a few coming up, so which is exciting.
Yeah, we do. This is exciting.
But please keep commenting in the movers group, and we'll all look out for comments and questions and how it's going, and if you have additional questions.
And when I'm feeling a bit better, I'm going to do some more stuff on there about how I relate to it in my little funny life and my brain, and just so see if things resonate with you.
It'd be lovely to hear also what you're doing and how you are making it relevant for your life.
Absolutely.
That is really inspiring.
It is. It is learning from each other. So Rakhee, thank you so much. As ever. I absolutely love hearing your wisdom. Your love of reading has served all of us very, very well. So thank you. Keep doing the reading. I really appreciate it and love your time. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. It's been an utter pleasure. All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.